Hello everyone, welcome back to Believer Science Academy Bengaluru. This is daily news analysis, the interview edition of Editorial Digest. Okay, so few articles from the Hindu, 15th, 15th November 2025. We'll discuss and analyze these articles and where we can use these editorials in our interview preparation. So the first editorial is about flexible inflation targeting, finding the right balance. This editorial is very important because it is written by C. Rangarajan, who is again an ex-RBI governor. So any articles written by ex-RBI governors or finance ministers or external affairs ministers, all these articles becomes very important for your preparation in interview. Okay, their ideals and their opinions can be used in your preparation and use it as an argument in the panel. Okay, first, what is the context? India's current FIT mandate, that is 4 plus or minus 2, that is minus 2, 4 plus 2, 6. So it is always between 4 plus or minus 2. So maximum extent of inflation should be 6 and the minimum extent of inflation should be 2. That is the current FIT mandate, but it is going to end in March 2026 and is under review. So RBI has released a discussion paper. So this particular article addresses three questions, that is headline inflation versus core inflation, acceptable level of inflation, and appropriate level band, inflation band. So why inflation control matters? That is, high inflation acts as a regressive consumption tax, hurting the poor disproportionately. That is given because the prices of goods keeps on increasing, which makes the consumption for the poor people very difficult. They have to spend more out of their pocket. So expenditure out of pocket or out of pocket expenditure increases, reducing their consumption and also reducing their livelihood, reducing their standard of living as well. Because if they are spending more on the consumption, they will have less to spend on other activities such as leisure. Okay. It damages savings as well as misallocates investments. Next, Chakravarti Committee in 1985 observed an acceptable price rise of 4%, though with unclear reasoning. There was no reasoning why 4% was considered as acceptable rise. Now, since automatic monetization ended in 1994, the FIT began in 2016. Inflation has been more stable despite multiple shocks here and there. What should RBI target now? Whether it should target headline inflation or whether it is target core inflation. Arguments for headline inflation. Objectives of monetary policy is to protect the poor, stabilize savings and investment. So headline inflation captures the actual cost of living, because headline inflation includes core inflation plus volatile instruments or volatile products such as food, petrol, etc., are included in headline inflation, because headline inflation includes these volatile products such as food and petrol or articles. They become very important because that is where the poor people spend more. So food inflation is not always pure supply shock. It is an expansionary monetary environment. Food inflation becomes more severe. Okay, so that is why Milton Friedman's insight was that prices rise only when money supply increases. Individual price increase does not mean general inflation unless the liquidity expands. So the key insight here is, if the aggregate demand is stable, food inflation only changes the relative prices, not the complete change in prices. But in India, food inflation often causes second round effects, that is higher wages, broader cost pressures pushes core inflation up, affecting general price levels. Okay, so hence RBI must consider food inflation in core policy decisions. What is acceptable inflation level? So C. Rangarajan says that instead of using core inflation, we should use headline inflation for policy decisions. Next, what is the acceptable level of inflation for India then? Phillips curve's inflation growth trade-off has not held empirically in the long run. Okay, normally there is a growth that as inflation keeps on increasing, the growth also keeps on increasing. This is inflation and this is growth. So inflation increases and the growth increases, but to an extent only. After that, in the long run, it keeps on reducing, because if the inflation crosses a certain limit, it becomes counterproductive to the economy. Next, high inflation hurts growth after a point, which leads to the concept of threshold inflation. Using data since 1991, excluding the COVID, a quadratic fit shows turning point at 3.98%. Okay, so that is why it indicates optimal inflation for India at approximately 4%, meaning any inflation till 4% helps reach this Phillips curve, that inflation is also rising and growth is also rising. But after 4%, if it reaches 5%, then there will be negative implications. Thus, growth keeps on reducing, but the inflation keeps on increasing. Okay. Next, sorry, here it should be 4% here. Next, forward-looking simulation. Preliminary models for 2026-2031 shows that acceptable inflation below 4% depending on the fiscal as well as external percentage or external pressures. Therefore, there is no stronger case for increasing the target above 4%. Okay, so there is no stronger case. So why do we need to increase it beyond 4%? So let us keep it at 4%. So what should be the inflation band? That is, the current band of 4 plus or minus 2 has given adequate flexibility, but RBI now needs a clearer guidance on how long it can operate near the upper band, that is at 6%, because the threshold inflation rate for India is 4% according to the Phillips curve, according to the previous mandates, according to the previous data and statistics. Now, if the inflation is at 4 plus 2%, that is 6%, how long can this economy sustain and how long can that be maintained? Okay. Next, data shows that beyond 6%, growth declines sharply. Hence, repeatedly hitting 6% violates the spirit of FIT. FIT and fiscal policy must work together, because the historical lesson is that in 1970s and 1980s, inflation driven by monetized fiscal deficits. Inflation was driven by monetized fiscal deficit. What is this monetized fiscal deficit? That is any fiscal deficit. What is fiscal deficit? Expenditure minus receipts. Okay, whenever the expenditure is high compared to receipt, we incur deficit. If this deficit is filled by monetization, what is this monetization? RBI printing fresh money. RBI printing fresh money, it will be the most inflationary in the context, in nature. Okay, so key reforms is the end of ad hoc treasury bills in 1994, reduced automatic monetization, and the FRBM Act of 2003 provided fiscal discipline and fiscal prudence, and the FIT 2006-2016 provided monetary stability. Okay, so from this monetary fiscal deficit, we have come a long way, we can say. Okay, we come a long way. Next, core insight. If either FRBM or FIT weakens, the other becomes ineffective, risking the macroeconomic stability. So the FRBM and FIT should be used not only in letter but also in spirit. So the optimum level 4 plus or minus 2, meaning 2% or 6%, will be counterproductive in the long run. So what should be the optimum? That should be focusing on the 4% itself, and also avoid fiscal monetized deficit. Fiscal monetized deficit should be avoided at every cost. Okay. Next, second article is talks about Great Nicobar project and the ministry in dots. What is this? So there is a new Great Nicobar project which has been mandated by the government of India, but this has been a point of controversy between opposition parties and the government, and also between NGT and the government, and also between all the environmentalists and the development supporters. So what is this? We'll discuss. On October 30, 2025, the Union Ministry admitted before the National Green Tribunal that 92,000 rupees crore Nicobar mega project will significantly impact islands rich biodiversity. The project includes transshipment port at the Galatia Bay, airport, power plant, and greenfield tourism project and the township. So all these were the actual part of the project. Okay, so this project has faced sustained scrutiny before the NGT and the Calcutta High Court. Now, key environmental admissions by the Environment Ministry is that during the hearing, ASG Aishwarya Bhati has acknowledged that the Galatia Bay, where port was planned, contains 20,000 plus live coral colonies, 50 plus nesting mounds of the endemic Nicobar megapod, which is a scheduled species in our Wildlife Protection Act of Wildlife Protection Act of 1972, an active nesting site for the giant leatherback turtle, which is the largest turtle in the world. The ministry still defended the project, stating that long-term mitigation measures till 2052 were built into the clearance. Okay, the government argument is that okay, we understand it is a significant environmentally sensitive zone, but we have taken adequate measures that there are mitigation measures which will cover it till 1950, so 2052. So we don't have to worry. But the article argues that there is a contradiction in the ministry, that is allowing and mitigation. How did you allow the project when there was no clear-cut mitigation purposes before? Only when it went to NGT, only when it became criticized, only when it became a point of controversy, you brought the mitigation measures. Why didn't you bring the mitigation measures or the clearances before accepting this project? So, article argues that ministry is mitigating problems it created by clearing the project. It allowed the project first and only then prescribed the conservation. That is not how environmental impact clearance happens. Next, why the ministry state is problematic. That is a denotification of Galathea Bay Wild Sanctuary in 2021. So, before or in line with the project of Great Eco Project, what they did was they wanted to denotify Great Galathea Bay Wildlife Sanctuary from Wildlife Sanctuary. So, the National Board for Wildlife, which once proposed protection in 1997, denotified to make way for the project. First step was we denotified this particular region. Species protected earlier, such as leatherback turtles, megapods, corals, mangroves, lost its legal protection because it was no longer a wildlife sanctuary which is notified. Then the same ministry claims mitigation measures will handle the impacts. Why do we need separate mitigation measures when it was already there? That is, the Galathea Bay was wildlife sanctuary which was notified before. Now you denotified it into normal wildlife sanctuary. It is a project problem you created before. Now you want to change the problem again. So why was the need to denotify this Galathea Bay Wildlife Sanctuary in the first place? Next, CRZ-1A controversy. What is this? According to the Coastal Regulation Zone norms, areas with corals, mangroves, turtle nesting beaches, seagrass beds, or in protected areas fall under CRZ-1A. What is the CRZ Zone 1A? It is the maximum protection. It only allows any activity which is not counterproductive to the environment. But in this case, it is counterproductive to the environment. It is harming the biodiversity and the environment. CRZ-1A prohibits the ports, but according to Great Eco Project, one of the component is port, Galathea Port. The NGT order in April 2023 was that explicitly said 20,668 corals exist at the port site. Therefore, the port falls under CRZ-1A and it is not permissible. Next, NGT set up high powered committee which asked NCSCM to verify. What is the NCSCM's claim? It said that reported no port of the projected area is CRZ-1A, which is false, calling it CRZ-1B, where the port construction is allowed. In the coastal regulation zones, there are 1A, 1B, 2, 3, 4 different zones are there. In 1A, it is completely highly protected. In 1B, port construction is allowed. So why did you change its naming from 1A to 1B? You wanted to allow the port construction. That is why you forcefully change its name, forcefully change its protection criteria as well. So issues was that circular logic, that is NCSCM decided that area is not CRZ-1A because ports can be built only in CRZ-1B. Hence it declared it CRZ-1B. The only reason they declared it as CRZ-1B is that in 1B ports construction can be allowed. So if the government has accepted the port construction, maybe it might have been CRZ-1B. That is the justification given by NCSCM. Confidential report is that NCSCM and HPC reports not made public, citing defense reasons, although the denotification was for the commercial activity. Next, Galathea Bay's continuing ecological importance. New data contradicts NCSCM. 600 plus leatherback turtles nestings in 2024, among the highest recorded, and the confirms Galathea Bay's strong ecological vitality. And if ASG Bhatia's statement are correct, then Galathea Bay is unquestionably CRZ-1A. So either The ministry submission to NGT or the NCSCM or HPC or High Court Committee reports are incorrect. Who is lying here? Is it the committee or is it the ministry? Next, this raises the question of scientific rigor, transparency, and procedural honesty in projects where there is a debate about conservation versus development. Okay. Next, key ethical and governance issues here is the conflict of interest. That is, MOFCC acts both as the regulator as well as facilitator of the large projects. Opacity, that is withholding environmental reports under the pretext of defense use. Next is dilution of ecological safeguards, that is from wildlife sanctuary to CRZ1B. Next is the regulatory capture, that is development agencies influencing the regulatory bodies. Finally, the weak environmental appeal. Appraisals, that is approvals based on the data not in public domain. Okay, so data should be made publicly made available. Only then the public can take a informed decision and they can be part of this decision making processes. Okay, so that is about Great Nuclear Project. And now third article is about doctors with bombs. Okay, so recently there are continuous events which led to this particular quote which was repeatedly used in the news channels, that is doctors of death. We'll discuss what is this doctors with bombs, doctors of death, and what is this white collar terrorism, etc., etc. The incident was in Red Fort blast in November 10. At 6:55, a powerful blast in the white car near the Red Fort killed 13 people and injured 20 people. The scene was devastating: shattered metal, dismembered bodies, and chaos on one of Delhi's busiest roads. The FIR was filed under UAPA, Explosive Substances Act, and sections of the Bharatiya Nyaya Samhita. Case was transferred to the National Investigation Agency. So that is the event, and the key suspect was Dr. Umar ul Nabi, who is a doctor from the Kashmir working at Al Falah University in Haryana. He is also a professor in this particular Al Falah University. He died in the blast, believed to be the mastermind and the driver of explosive-laden vehicle. CCTV shows him entering Delhi at 8:04 a.m. and conducting reconnaissance at the Kashmir Gate, the Darya Guns, Suneri Masjid, etc. Officials believe that he panicked and detonated the bomb prematurely due to improper assembly. Shows evolution of white collar terrorism, educated professionals radicalized through ideology and encrypted networks. Okay, so this event shows how even the educated people are falling into the indoctrination process, falling into the radicalization. We discuss about it. The white collar terror model. What is this white collar terror model? It is a rare but a disturbing feature of this case is that the core group consisted of doctors and the medical professionals. Previously, the notion was that terrorism is the result of absence of education and the presence of poverty or hunger, okay, or any crisis. But what is happening here? Here there is no absence of education and they are not poverty, or they are not poor, or they are not hungry, and there is no crisis for them at the moment. Instead of all these things, they became terrorists. Why? The members arrested was Dr. Muzammil Ahmad Ghani, a junior doctor at Al Falah, rented a room storing 360 kg explosives. Then Dr. Adil Ahmad Rathar, arrested in Shahrampur. Then Dr. Umar Nabi, mastermind, died in the blast, and Dr. Shahin Saeed and Dr. Parvez Saeed Ansari, alleged support members, and several non-medical co-conspirators such as clerk Irfan Ahmad, poster boys, logistical handlers. Along with that, there was a recent incident in Gujarat where another Dr. Mohiuddin planned to synthesize ricin, which is one of the deadliest toxins from castor oils. He wanted to synthesize ricin from the castor oil to bring toxin so that it can be used in food, water, prasadams, etc., etc. This is a curious case or a very dangerous case of chemical terrorism or bioterrorism. Bioterror attempt. This was the first bioterror attempt or chemical terrorism attempt on India, you can say. So there was the main culprit or the mastermind there was also doctor as well. So the recoveries of this was 360 kg ammonium nitrate, 12 suitcases of explosive materials, AK Krino, AK-56 rifles, magazines, walkie-talkies, timers, batteries, everything was ready to bring a timer based bomb explosion. 2,900 kgs of IED making materials were recovered in total across the Jammu and Kashmir operations. 2,900 kg IED. Just imagine how much of chaos they could have caused. How they operated. They used encrypted channels for communication and fund transfer. Funds raised under the guise of social and charitable cause, relocated from Kashmir to Faridabad or Shahrampur to avoid the scrutiny. And the trigger was posters in Srinagar. Posters in Urdu warning locals not to cooperate with police appeared on Norgam in October 17. A CID officer found them suspicious. Investigation into the posters arrested 3 youths and the cleric Irfan Ahmad linked to all the 3 doctors. There they got to know this cleric in Irfan Ahmad, who was a Maulvi in a madrasa, was also in link with all the 3 doctors who were arrested in this particular case. The seemingly minor event unraveled massive terror modules. Just a Urdu poster of not to cooperate, all these pamphlets they are transferred or regulated among the local Kashmiris by this Irfan or the cleric Irfan led to our intelligence agencies cracking one of the biggest terror attack. Okay, they were able to foil this biggest terror plot. Next, radicalization pathways. Based on the investigation, Dr. Umar Nabi was highly radicalized and indoctrinated the others. The cleric was used to radicalize others as well, becoming a recruitment node. The doctors allegedly sought to change the system and establish Islamic law, that is Sharia. They procured chemicals from open markets using the medical knowledge and the transnational linkages, that is visits to UAE, Saudi Arabia, Turkey in 2022 by some of the mentors under the scrutiny. They learned about all these things from different Islamic countries as well. Another doctor's brother is missing, who is suspected in Afghanistan. Jammu and Kashmir police issued a red corner notice and suspected handler in Pakistan as well. So, in this particular case with respect to Delhi, the major mastermind had connections with Jaish-e-Mohammed and also connections with Palgam attack, also connections with Pulwama attack. And in the Gujarat case, the main chief accused had connection with ISKP, that is ISIS Khorasan province handler. Okay, main handler was in Afghanistan. See, from Delhi to Pakistan and Gujarat to Afghanistan, the connections are transboundary in nature or transnational in nature. That is why it is very significant and very dangerous. Next, human cost was families of victims devastated. That is, on 23-year-old Noman died while shopping. 10-year-old girl waited for her father who never returned. Cab driver Shakir battles for life in ICU because of these radicalized youth or because of these radicalized doctors who are the sufferers. Poor innocent livelihood earning people were the victims of this particular case. Institutional response was case was handed to NIA, coordination among Delhi police, Jammu and Kashmir police and Faridabad police. Fire services, local police, hospital systems reached swiftly and university campus now under the intense scrutiny. That is Al-Fawa University is under intense scrutiny. So this is the event that shook India in the recent past. So that is why I discussed it. So all these articles will becomes very important for you to build your opinion and how the indoctrination happens in new cases and how inflation can be reduced and what should be the way forward for inflation and also various other aspects. So note down some of the important keywords, etc., so that you can use in your answers and also improve your vocabulary. Okay, so this is about editorial digest for 15 November 2025. If you like the video, if you think it is helpful, then please like the video and also subscribe to the channel. With this, I will end the video. Jai Hind, Jai Karnataka.